Hi, guys. Shawn and I have some exciting news. We have created official Twitter and Instagram accounts for the Oh Mr. Sheffield podcast. It is at Oh Mr. Chef Pod on both platforms, and that is Oh Mr. Chef with 2 Fs. So Oh Mr. Chef Pod. Check it out. Follow us. It's going to have all the latest and greatest from us about this show, and we hope you like it.
Now enjoy the episode.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline. The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast where we talk about the hit 90s sitcom The Nanny, starring Fran Drescher. This is episode 6 of our podcast, and also we're talking about season 1, episode 6 of The Nanny. The episode is titled The Butler, the Husband, the Wife, and Her Mother. I am Shawn Pasquale here with Toria Sheffield.
I was about to say my own name. Sometimes I don't know when to cut in when you're doing the intro, and I feel like if there was video of me, you'd see me opening my mouth and then shutting very abruptly. Like
some type of verbal double Dutch.
Yeah, it's like getting really it's almost about to go on stage and then not. It's this. It's a little moment of anxiety every time we do this.
I'm sorry. I'll make it more clear next time. Anyway, this is Toria. Toria, you say your own name. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Hi, this is Toria. And so this is the episode. It's actually very appropriate that we had this confusing back and forth just now, because this is the episode where Niles pretends to be Mr. Sheffield and Mr. Sheffield pretends to be the butler because of a very complicated and confusing plot device.
Yes, and that is why I purposefully had all that confusion at the top of the episode. So we had, as you heard last episode, Toria loved that one right out of the gate. I kind of warmed up to it as I watched the episode. This episode, I think we were reversed on, because I love this sitcom tropey nonsense. I think it's delightful.
I watched it and was like, this is my least favorite kind of episode of any type of show.
All right, I don't even need your paragraph.
I hate these overly contrived, it's okay. I'm just gonna I'm gonna say it because I go.
Dude, it's a classic. It is a classic sitcom, mistaken identity episode. That's it. Fran has to pretend to be something she's not, which leads everyone else in her life having to pretend to be something that they're not. And then the show itself kind of dovetails into bringing it all together with Brighton's lie, and then Fran and Maxwell having to call him out on being a liar, only to realize they are also currently living lies, and everyone ends up undoing their lies.
It's a house of lies.
Yeah.
Well, here is what I instantly, from the opening, even before the theme song, just didn't like. Basically, we find out that Niles is going to be getting a visit and a review from something called the Professional Butlers Association. And if the review is favorable, he will get admitted into the association like all of his butler relatives before him. So I was already okay, they have created, and again, I love the show, but this is not my favorite plot line. They have literally created the most made up, absurd thing.
No, not true. There's a real life Butlers Guild, but they couldn't use the name Butlers Guild because that's probably, it's copyrighted and stuff. But there is a real such thing as a Butlers Guild.
Okay, and you have to have some formal review process, I assume.
It's a real, it's literally the International Guild of Professional Butlers, and it is exactly what you think it looks like. Their website has a bunch of dudes in butler outfits, setting up silverware. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, wow. Okay. Well, fine.
I think that many classic sitcom tropes, this particular one, it works because the whole episode in and of itself is a setup and a punchline, right? Like, because the punchline of the entire episode is when Cece walks in at the end and all of their lies are undone because Cece doesn't fit into the equation. They know that they can't bring her in on the lie. So I don't know. I love this episode. I have so many things that we can talk about. I guess we should talk about, though, overall, this was like I guess kind of a Brighton-y heavy episode, one of the more Brighton-y heavy storylines we've seen so far. And my note was they don't know what to do with Brighton yet.
Well, yeah. So it's like the B plot is we find out like very early on that he's been elected class president, and Mr. Sheffield keeps making all these comments of like you're a chip off the old block. I was president of my class at Eton, and I'm so proud of you, son. And I wasn't that invested in.
I got vibes of Alex P. Keaton from Family Ties with this Brighton plotline, and it felt to me like they were. It feels like they're trying to find the right identity because like they have the Maggie thing kind of really well worked out, and they've got the Gracie thing kind of really well worked out. But like so far, Brighton's whole purpose has just been like punchline delivery.
Yeah, he's a smart ass.
Yeah, and so this is the first time that we're seeing like anything that sort of like expands on like, well, what is his like school life like? And so here they go for like throughout the whole episode. I noted he's making like political jokes, like he makes a Nixon reference in the first scene, and then later he does a George Bush impression.
No, I think that was a Ross. Was it? Oh, I thought he was doing
George
Ross
Bush.
Perot.
That was Bush 1.
You're right.
So, and he's part of the young, like he's like a little mini Republican, which tracks, right? But it also feels like they're just sort of figuring this out about him. And so like, it kind of feels all crammed into this episode. They
are using him for a lot of jokes and references and impressions that are well beyond his years. Like, we'll get to it, but in the next episode, he's literally doing a Rod Serling impression from the Twilight Zone.
I had problems with that. Yes.
But we'll get to it.
So yeah, so basically the first scene kind of sets things up, and really when it gets going is Sylvia, Fran's mom, shows up, and she's like, it's basically they have like these very well off relatives, and it's clear that they're sort of always rubbing in Sylvia's face how like great they are and how great their daughter's doing and how much money she makes and how rich her husband is. And, Sylvia comes over to sort of complain about all of that. And Fran is like, well, what did you say? And she says, oh, and I told her you were, married to a rich, famous Broadway producer and you live in a palace. And she's like, oh, ma. And then she's like, oh, and also they're finding a parking spot outside. They're here to see your house. And that's sort of like how we get into it. And like immediately set up this sort of very classic sitcom trope, right? Of like, we have to pretend to be something that we're not. Perfect Strangers recycled this plot line, I feel like. And I think The Ellen Show also did this. And I would be not surprised if this was pulled from like even more classic, like Mary Tyler Moore era, Lucy era, even of just like, oh, we told the person coming over that we're blank. And now we have to be, look, it's WandaVision just did it in episode 1.
I hate these plot lines so much so I rewatched all 3 this morning just to be fresh, and I couldn't get through this one. It's so frustrating to me when these sort of like absurd, unrealistic plot devices are utilized. It's so
what's interesting about this is so this is actually, I believe, our first bottle episode of the whole season so far too, because they never leave the downstairs living room set in this episode. They don't even go in the kitchen. They don't even show you the kitchen. At one point, characters go into the kitchen, but we never change sets to go in there. This is all happening in the living room. And it's a lot of like, it's very French door farcy in a lot of ways too, where it's like someone leaves a room, someone comes into a room. You know, there's like a lot of like interesting blocking going on to like move everybody around, and it's done very much like a play. So I always find these kinds of episodes interesting because it's clearly like from a production standpoint, it's like, how do we make this work? What do we have? We've got these guest stars coming up that we're gonna have to pay. We need an episode here, and then like, how do we make it interesting? So the plot in and of itself gets heightened to this weird, like everyone's pretending to be something that they're not. But what I think they're fun on sitcoms is because it's always an episode that gives your actors a chance to like do more than we see them do. Like I loved watching Niles be Max Sheffield and like getting to see that actor do more than just what he does, which he does great, but getting him to see like kind of break that, I thought was very fun. And same for Max, you know.
This is actually when I started enjoying the episode because there was just some emotional. It led to this moment of like growth or progress with Mr. Sheffield, where at first he's going to have nothing to do with this ruse. He's like, I've left the house for literally like 10 minutes and I come back and you've like entrapped me in a web of lies. I'm not going to lie for you both. And then, you know, they appealed, you know, Fran sort of appeals on Niles' behalf and Niles appeals on Fran's behalf, where it's basically like, you know, this would mean a lot for us if you did this. This is really big if you did this for us. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. And like literally,
no, So no, you're missing a beat. You're missing a beat, the even better beat. So he goes, so what happens is he says, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. And he starts to walk out of the room and the guests say, we'd like some drinks. And Mr. Sheffield just keeps walking. Like, he's just like, I'm walking up the stairs. And Fran goes, you know, yes, our butler will get them for you. And he like rolls his eyes like, I'm not going to do that. And then the guests of Fran, like the relatives,
her
or whatever,
from Boca.
Right. Her cousins from Boca, they make some like snide comment about Fran and like about how like, I forget what it even
like
is.
She clearly doesn't have a handle on this household. She's definitely in way over her head.
Yes. And that Mr. Sheffield like spins on his heel and he's like, what can I get you from the kitchen? And so, yeah, I agreed with you that was the best moment of the episode.
And like the audience is cheering too. It's one of those sitcom moments where it's like, the kids are clearly so happy he's actually doing it. And like the live studio audience is also like, I mean, maybe it wasn't a live studio audience, but it's definitely a moment where it's like, we are even given the cue. Like that's a really big moment for that character.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kids, and then they get to have a little bit of fun with that. Like I liked Brighton. I liked him, you know, Brighton says, will you get me something? And he goes, sure, Brighton. And then Brighton goes, that's Master Brighton.
Yes.
And
that's like, Master Brighton to you.
Yeah. And it kind of builds in this nice way, I think, as far as like comedic pacing goes, where everything just, all the lies start to kind of layer on top of each other. And then, of course, things get further complicated when there's another knock at the door and it's one of Brighton's friends from like the Young Republican Society. And he comes in and then that like kind of makes the lie even worse. And then they find out that Brighton has been lying to them and that Brighton pretended that he won this president of the, you know, whatever club. And he didn't really win. And Fran, you know, this is what I was kind of talking about before, is Fran and Mr. Sheffield kind of pull Brighton aside and they're like, you know, you can't live a lie and you can't lie to people and blah, blah, blah. And of course, in telling him that, they realize that they can't, and maybe they have to do something about it. And so they go back out to sort of like confess. And then like, again, in like very good like comedic pacing, the door opens and it's Cece. And like, she just blows everything up because she doesn't understand what's happening. And you get a great like audience reaction in that moment too, because at this point you've led your audience to like understand like how much worse this can now be. And I thought that was like a great button to everything, is just like Cece coming in and blowing everything up.
Well, it's because Fran comes clean about not really being married to Mr. Sheffield. But then she realizes she can't come completely clean because that would blow Niles' cover as in front of the Butler people. So we think that like everything's okay until Cece, and then it gets revealed that Niles was lying the whole time too.
Yeah. And then, again, in another sort of like nice kind of character beat, I think it's Fran and Mr. Sheffield sort of stand up for Niles. Once Niles' cover kind of gets blown, his, Butler Association people are like, well, this guy sucks or whatever. And I think it's sort of the both of them that kind of say like, he's gone above and beyond of a Butler and like, he's part of our family. And I know I'm doing this kind of all over the place, but I do, before we kind of get into segments, I wanted to, point out this was an episode written by Howard Myers, and he wrote a whole bunch of Different Strokes, Small Wonder, and Who's the Boss episodes, which are all three of those shows, at least for me, were like staples of like my sitcom youth. Do those shows track for you?
They do, and I feel like they all absolutely probably had shows like that, like episodes like this.
Yes, probably. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, what were your highlights? I guess
I think some people like just find the premise of this so funny, but because I didn't, I feel like my favorite parts were those like authentic emotional beats between the characters, where they sort of had to like, at the end of the day, this just showed how much all of these people are willing to do for each other, right? Like, and it really came from this like really good, loving place. Like when Mr. Sheffield would do this for Niles and Fran, and when Niles would even do this for Fran, even though I think she blackmails him with some information to make him do it. She's basically like, if you do this, I won't tell Mr. Sheffield about like that vase you broke or something like that.
Yes.
But it's like, it's almost like when you, for example, watch a show like The Office or something, and like over time you realize like, oh, these people all actually really care about each other and they're kind of a family. Like that is really, I keep using this word for this show, but that's very satisfying. So like that was the highlight of this episode for me.
It's a smart spot in the season to place this episode too, because of how it highlights that, because it sort of goes like, hey, look, we're 6 episodes in now. These people, like, they care about each other enough at this point that like they're willing to lie for each other. They're willing to cover for each other. They don't want to blow up anyone's spot. And so it kind of solidifies, like, she's not just like the nanny who showed up anymore. She's
and my favorite line, it's silly. It's not even, I don't even know if you'd remember it, but basically, when Fran's cousin says something really rude to Fran, Maggie very defensively goes, "Who asked you anyway, you big green cow?" Because she's wearing like a green jumpsuit. And Fran goes, "Maggie, it's turquoise."
And then when they leave, the lady goes, "It's actually emerald." And like,
yeah. But I really enjoyed that Fran was not going to correct her for being rude. She was just correcting the color.
I didn't hear any Yiddish in this episode, and I wasn't sure if I missed it, but the closest that I wrote down was at one point she says, "You're a real Budinsky." And I don't think that's actually Yiddish.
For sure. Yeah, I didn't track any Yiddish words, so I just did my own little research, and I found that the Yiddish word for liar is Ligner. Ligner.
Oh.
A real Ligner.
Also, probably important fact that I realized in this episode is Fran says to Niles at one point, "What's your last name?" And he goes, "It's just Niles, like Cher." So I think canon, Niles' name is just Niles, like Cher.
Yes, that's true. We do never find out his last name. But it made me wonder, like, what is Niles' life like outside of his job? Like, is he going on dates? Does he live in the house?
Yeah, he lives in the house. He lives in the butler's quarters.
Yeah. And then it's like, so I assume he moved over to the US he followed the Sheffield family from England, I'm assuming. What it
seems like, yeah. And
he just doesn't have a life outside of his duty? Is that?
I mean, I think that as the show goes on, we get to see more of his life. They kind of delve into that. But again, one of the strengths of the pilot of this is that every character is like perfectly toned into like what they are. But then I think as the show kind of unfolds, you see where like there's weakness in that, in the sense that like, well, now these people have to start to like be real and have lives. So like even the Brighton character, he's great in the pilot because like he's just got a couple of funny quips. But then you have to figure out like, well, who is this kid? You know, like what's this kid's whole deal? All right, so time for segments.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For some reason, I thought we already did. Well, we did Yiddish. We talked about our best lines.
Wait, I got to play the segment song. What's going on here? And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria. So maybe there's a segment song to play. Maybe there's not. It depends on what Shawn got up to this week.
Now you just sound like you're babbling. It's definitely played by now, probably. Most likely.
I bet you it blew our listeners away.
I bet it did.
The nanny trivia for this week, it's a really nice tie-in in terms of the Mr. Sheffield Niles like switcheroo. So when this show was broadcast in the UK, apparently many viewers wrote in to chide the actor who played Mr. Sheffield, Charles Shaughnessy, over his, quote, imitation English accent, and suggested he practice with co-star Daniel Davies, who's Niles, because he is clearly the real British one. Ironically, the actor who plays Mr. Sheffield is really English, and Niles is from Arkansas.
Whoa.
So, super funny.
That's messed up. That guy's from Arkansas?
He's from Arkansas.
Niles? He's the best actor of all time. How did he ever win an Emmy for this? He should have. I'll tell you that.
Did he win an Oscar?
Did he win an Oscar? What's going on?
But I mean, that is some true mistaken identity.
Wow.
And then, so Cece's hardly in this. So instead of like, who's the Fran, who's the Cece, I thought I would just pose a question.
Who's the Fran, who's the Sylvia?
We can do that. We can totally do that. My question was just going to be: have you ever told a lie that snowballed?
Yeah. When I first told you I knew Macaulay Culkin, and then I had to meet him, and no. Wouldn't that be funny if that was my lie was that I never actually knew Mac when I first was like, hey, I'm hiring you for this company where I'm working with Macaulay Culkin.
And you're like, okay, now I got to make it real.
No.
What a creepy ruse that would have been.
An insane thing to do. I'm trying to think, that kind of elaborate lying is very, it's a lot. And I like really can't think of any time where I've like gotten myself into a like comedically heightened like lie where I'm just like, oh yeah. And like, it just like my ruse just keeps building lie onto lie. Have you, like, do you have a story that you were like, oh, this happened to me hilariously once?
No. Literally the only ones that I can think of are being a kid and like breaking something and claiming it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Clearly being me.
I mean, I guess I've done that. I was trying to think of like, have I ever been in a situation where like someone walked into my boss's office and I was in there and they were like, are you Mr. Clements? And I was like, yes, I am Mr. Clements. I am the boss of this place. Hello, how are you? And then my real boss walked in and I was like, fetch me my coffee, boy. And he was like, what? And I was like, you're my assistant and I am you. I mean, I am Mr. Clements, the most very importantest person at this company who has this meeting right now. I can't, would that ever happen in real life? Do you think you'd have to be so fucking down with somebody?
I know somebody, I'm not going to say who in case they listen, they'll be so upset with me, but they,
Brad Pitt.
So it's hanging with Brad and Angie pre-divorce. And no, basically this person was in college and somehow somebody thought that she was from Texas and she wasn't from Texas. She was from DC. And everyone else just started like latching on to this trivia about her. Like, oh, you're from Texas. You're from Texas. And they even coined the nickname. I'm not even going to say her real name, but I'll just say that the name was Beth. And they were like, oh, so, hey, it's Texas Beth. And like everybody on her floor would like call her that. And she just like didn't correct them for so long that she had to maintain the lie she was from Texas.
I mean, I guess the closest I have to that is when the town that I grew up in had a place called Pasquale's Pizza. And my last name is Di Pasquale. It's not the same last name. It's different. But that place was called Pasquale's Pizza. And I never told anyone, like I never volunteered this information. But often in school, people would hear my name and then ask me, does your dad own Pasquale's Pizza? And at first I would say no, but it happened enough that I started to get annoyed. And then I would say yes. And I would be like, you should go in there and ask for my dad. His name is John. And tell him that you go to school with me and you'll get free pizza.
I mean, that's more just you punking people.
Yeah. But that's the closest thing I got. I mean,
You're still delighted. But yeah, no, I think that's it. Yeah, I guess neither of us are sociopaths. We've never lied over our heads.
I'm gonna close up the
pizza shop that your dad owns.
Yeah, I gotta close up the pizza shop, but also I'm gonna close up the segments portion of the show with the segments closing theme. Here we go. And now segments.
So. Segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria.
So, for an episode that you hated and said was the worst episode you've ever seen of any television show ever made.
I did not say that. You are taking the words right out of my mouth. I said, I didn't really enjoy it.
Oh, right. That. Anyway, this was a pretty full episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, our show.
Yeah, I think it was.
I think we did a good job. So I think that's it. Everybody who, if you're listening to this, and you must be if you're hearing my voice right now, please like and subscribe and leave a comment if you can on whatever podcasting platform you're hearing this show, and tell people about it and retweet and share it. And if you want to follow me and Toria, I'm on Twitter at Shawn Writes, ShawnWrites, Shawn Writes. And Toria is on Instagram.
I'm on Instagram at just Toria Sheffy, and it's 2 F's and a Y, Toria Sheffy. Also, this was another weird thing. When we first met, I don't do Twitter anymore, but yours was Shawn Writes and my handle was Toria Writes.
Yes.
That's what I remember.
Yep.
Man, brother from a different mother.
You'll see on Twitter, if you follow me there, I often tag Toria on Twitter just because I think it's funny that her name is Toria Writes on there, even though she never responds, and I know that she doesn't.
I just don't remember my password. I got to get it. I just got to get back in there. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. This is so fun, and we hope you're enjoying it.
The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
I go, Miss Fine.